You have been living a lie that you never chose to believe. Every morning you wake up carrying the weight of incompleteness, searching the faces around you for some sign that today will be different. You scroll through success stories of others, wondering what secret formula they discovered that you somehow missed. You attend seminars, read books, follow gurus, always looking for that one missing piece that will finally make you whole. But what if I told you that you have been seeking outside yourself for something that has never left your side? What if the very thing you have been desperately trying to find has been quietly waiting within you all along, not as a distant possibility, but as your truest reality? You are not broken. You are not lacking. You are not incomplete. You are disconnected. Within you right now dwells an infinite intelligence, a timeless presence that has been with you since your first breath. This force does not need to be created, developed, or earned. It needs to be remembered. It needs to be acknowledged. It needs to be obeyed. The moment you stop waiting for permission from the world and start acting as if this power is already yours, everything changes. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when the conditions are perfect. Now, this is not another motivational speech that will leave you inspired for a week and forgotten by next month. This is a fundamental shift in how you see yourself and how you move through this world. This is about stepping into the identity you were always meant to embody. The world has trained you to believe that readiness comes before action. But readiness is the greatest myth ever sold to humanity. What you truly need is availability. What you truly need is the courage to listen to that quiet voice that has been whispering your name your entire life. Today, you will learn how to silence the noise that has been drowning out your inner knowing. You will discover how to move in such perfect alignment with your divine essence that the universe has no choice but to respond. Not through magic, but through the natural law of coherence. If you are ready to stop living as a stranger to your own power, if you are done waiting for someday to become today, then subscribe to this channel right now. Because what you are about to hear will not just change your thinking, it will change who you are. Number 1, reconnection with inner power. You wake up every morning feeling like something is missing. You search the faces of successful people, wondering what they possess that you do not. You consume book after book, seminar after seminar, hoping someone will finally hand you the key to the power you desperately seek. You check your phone for inspiration, scroll through quotes that make you feel motivated for exactly 3 minutes, then return to that familiar ache of incompleteness. But here is the truth that will shatter every lie you have been told about your own nature. You are not empty. You never were. You are disconnected. And there is a profound difference between these two states that will change everything once you understand it. Every human being who walks this earth carries within them a divine essence, an infinite intelligence that has been present since their first breath. This is not mystical thinking. This is fundamental truth. You do not lack power, you lack recognition of the power that already dwells within you. You have been conditioned to believe you are a beggar when you are actually royalty who has forgotten your own throne. The greatest tragedy of human existence is not poverty, disease, or even death. It is the spectacle of divine beings crawling through life on their knees, begging for scraps of validation from other divine beings who have also forgotten who they are. This is the blind leading the blind into a ditch of collective amnesia. Imagine a mansion with every room fully furnished, every necessity provided, but the owner lives outside in the cold because they have forgotten they possess the key. This is your current state. You stand outside your own divine inheritance, begging others for what already belongs to you. You knock on doors, seeking entry into kingdoms far smaller than the one you already rule. The world has trained you to believe that strength comes from external sources. That validation must be earned from others. That God exists somewhere above the clouds, watching from a distance, deciding whether you are worthy of his attention. These are the lies that keep you powerless. These are the chains that bind eagles to the ground, convincing them they are chickens. I once knew a man who spent 30 years climbing corporate ladders, chasing recognition, accumulating wealth, believing that success would finally make him feel complete. His office walls were covered with awards, his bank account grew fat with zeros, his calendar filled with meetings that made him feel important, Yet with each achievement, the emptiness grew deeper. The applause became hollow. The praise felt like counterfeit currency. One night, broken and exhausted, he stopped running. In that moment of stillness, he heard something he had been drowning out his entire life, a quiet voice that had been calling his name since childhood. The voice was not coming from outside, it was rising from within. It spoke with a familiarity that made him weep, because he realized he had been homesick for himself. That night, he discovered what every seeker eventually learns. God is not out there. God is in here. The divine presence you seek exists in the very center of your being, waiting not to be invited in, but to be remembered. You do not need to reach God. You need to stop running from the God that already lives within you. The moment you stop seeking externally and start listening internally, your entire world shifts. Your walk changes because you realize you are not walking alone. Your energy transforms because you are no longer trying to manufacture power from emptiness. Your decisions become aligned with a wisdom that surpasses human understanding because you are finally consulting the ultimate counselor that resides within your own soul. This is not about becoming something new. This is about remembering what you have always been. You are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being who has temporarily forgotten your divine nature while having a human experience. Here is what you must do, and you must do it today. Before you scroll through another success story that makes you feel inadequate, before you search for another guru to follow, before you purchase another course that promises to fix what was never broken, sit in complete silence for 10 minutes. Ask yourself this question: what would I do if I knew that infinite intelligence already lived within me? Then listen, not for a voice from heaven, but for the whisper that rises from your own divine center. The power you seek is not coming, it is already here. The question is not whether you are worthy of it. The question is whether you are finally ready to claim what has always been yours. Stop begging for what you already possess. Stop waiting for permission to access your own divine inheritance. The kingdom of heaven is not a destination. It is your current address. Act like it. Number 2, the trap of waiting and spiritual awakening. You have been taught the most dangerous lie in human history. You have been conditioned to believe that you must wait. Wait to feel ready. Wait for validation. Wait for the right time. Wait for fear to disappear. Wait for someone to give you permission to become who you were always meant to be. This waiting is not wisdom. It is the trap that has kept you small, the prison that has held your power hostage, the lie that has convinced you that someday is a real place on the calendar. Every morning you wake up telling yourself the same story. I'm not ready yet. I need more knowledge. I need more confidence. I need more resources. I need more time. But here is what you fail to understand. Readiness is not a feeling. Readiness is a decision. And you have been deciding to remain unready your entire life. You wait for the fear to subside before you take action, not realizing that fear never subsides. It only gets quieter when you stop listening to it and louder when you give it your full attention. You wait for courage to arrive like a package in the mail, not understanding that courage is not the absence of fear, but the presence of action despite fear. Think of a river that refuses to flow until it feels ready to reach the ocean. Think of a seed that waits to feel worthy before it pushes through the soil. Think of the sun that delays its rising until it feels confident enough to light the world. Nature does not wait. Nature responds to the divine impulse within and moves with perfect obedience to the laws that govern all creation. But you have been programmed to resist these natural laws. Society has convinced you that hesitation is prudence, that delay is preparation, that waiting is spiritual maturity. These are the philosophies of mediocrity disguised as wisdom. There was a woman who spent 7 years preparing to start her business. 7 years of courses, seminars, and planning. 7 years of waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect knowledge, the perfect confidence. One day her daughter looked at her and asked, "Mama, why do you keep getting ready to get ready?" In that moment, she realized she had been using preparation as an excuse for paralysis. The next day, she stopped preparing and started doing. Within 6 months, her business was thriving. The very thing she thought would take 7 years of preparation took 6 months of action. This is the truth that will set you free from the prison of perpetual waiting. Spiritual obedience is not about perfection, it is about availability. It is not about feeling ready, it is about being willing. The divine voice within you is not waiting for you to become worthy of its guidance. It is waiting for you to become available to its direction. When you finally understand that the call to action is the call itself, everything changes. You realize that the trembling in your hands is not a sign of inadequacy, but a signal of standing at the threshold of something significant. You understand that the very thing that makes you want to wait is the very thing that makes it time to move. The universe does not respond to your readiness. It responds to your obedience. It does not wait for your fear to disappear before it opens doors. It opens doors when you walk toward them while still afraid. It does not require your perfection before it shows you favor. It shows you favor when you move in faith despite your imperfection. Here is what changes when you stop waiting and start walking. The moment you take the first step while trembling, the second step becomes clearer. The moment you speak while your voice shakes, your voice becomes stronger. The moment you move without knowing exactly where you are going, the path begins to illuminate itself beneath your feet. This is not reckless action. This is sacred obedience. This is not moving without thinking. This is moving without overthinking. This is not acting without preparation. This is refusing to use preparation as an excuse for perpetual postponement. Today, identify one action you have been waiting to take, one conversation you have been postponing, one decision you have been delaying, one step you have been avoiding, then take it. Not when you feel ready, not when the fear subsides, not when the conditions are perfect. Take it now while trembling, while uncertain, while imperfect. Because the greatest tragedy is not that you might fail. The greatest tragedy is that you might spend your entire life waiting for a readiness that never comes, while your divine purpose waits patiently in the wings for an actor who refuses to take the stage. Stop waiting, start walking. The universe has been waiting for your availability, not your adequacy. Number 3, spiritual coherence and manifestation. You have been living in contradiction, and this contradiction has been the source of every frustration, every blocked door, every unanswered prayer you have ever experienced. You speak of faith while acting in fear. You claim to trust divine timing while anxiety controls your decisions. You declare your belief in infinite possibility while your behavior screams limitation. This internal war between what you profess and how you proceed has created a static that blocks every blessing trying to reach you. Manifestation is not magic, it is coherence. It is the alignment between what you believe in your heart and how you behave in your life. It is the harmony between your inner convictions and your outer actions. When these forces work together instead of against each other, the universe has no choice but to respond. You have been taught to think of manifestation as wishful thinking, as some mystical process where you imagine things into existence through positive thoughts alone. This is not manifestation, this is fantasy. True manifestation occurs when your belief system and your behavioral system begin to speak the same language. Picture a radio that is tuned to one frequency in its mind, but broadcasting on another frequency through its actions. The signal is scrambled, the message is unclear, the reception is filled with static. This is your current state, when you live in contradiction between what you say you believe and how you actually live. But when you align these frequencies, when your thoughts, words, and actions all resonate at the same vibration, something extraordinary happens. The static clears, the signal becomes strong. The universe receives your transmission with perfect clarity and responds with mathematical precision. I knew a man who prayed every day for financial abundance while living every day in fear of poverty. His prayers were sincere, but his actions were contradictory. He saved every penny out of scarcity, avoided opportunities out of fear, and spoke constantly about his lack. His beliefs pointed north while his behaviors pointed south. For years, he wondered why his prayers seemed to hit the ceiling and fall back down. One day, he realized that God was not the problem. His coherence was the problem. He began to align his actions with his beliefs. He tithed as if he trusted divine provision. He invested as if he believed in divine multiplication. He spoke as if he expected divine favor. Within months, opportunities began flowing toward him with such frequency that he barely had time to process them all. The change was not in God's willingness to bless him. The change was in his willingness to act in harmony with what he claimed to believe. This is the secret that every person who walks in divine power understands. Coherence creates a vibrational field that attracts what is in alignment and repels what is in opposition. When your heart believes one thing and your hands do another, you create confusion in the spiritual realm. But when your heart and your hands work together, you create a magnetic force that draws exactly what you need exactly when you need it. Doors open not because you are perfect, but because you are consistent. Resources appear not because you are worthy, but because you are aligned. People come into your life not because you are special, but because you are coherent. The universe collaborates with those who collaborate with themselves. This requires daily choices. Every morning you wake up with the opportunity to either reinforce the contradiction or strengthen the coherence. Every decision is either moving you toward alignment or away from it. Every action is either supporting your stated beliefs or undermining them. When you live in coherence, you stop pushing against life and start flowing with it. You stop trying to convince the universe to give you what you want and start demonstrating that you are ready to receive it. You stop begging for change and start embodying the change you seek. The transformation is not in the external circumstances. The transformation is in the internal consistency. When you become coherent, your environment has no choice but to reorganize itself around your new vibrational frequency. Here is what you must understand. The universe is not holding back your blessings until you prove yourself worthy. The universe is waiting for you to stop contradicting yourself long enough to receive what is already being offered. Your prayers are already answered. Your needs are already met. Your path is already prepared. The only question is whether you are coherent enough to recognize and receive what is already yours. Today, examine the gap between your beliefs and your behaviors. Identify where you have been saying one thing while doing another. Then choose coherence. Align your actions with your convictions. Make your behavior match your beliefs. Watch how quickly the universe begins to respond when you stop sending mixed signals and start broadcasting a clear, consistent message. Coherence is not a luxury. It is a requirement for anyone who wants to live in the fullness of their divine potential. Number 4, silence as a divine channel. You cannot hear the voice of God because you refuse to turn down the volume of everything else. Your life is a symphony of noise, a constant barrage of distractions that drowns out the most important conversation you could ever have. You wonder why divine guidance feels absent while you fill every moment of silence with mental chatter, digital stimulation, and emotional turbulence. The voice of God does not shout, it whispers. And whispers can only be heard in quiet spaces by quiet minds. You have been conditioned to fear silence. You reach for your phone the moment quietness threatens to settle in. You turn on music, television, podcasts, anything to avoid the profound discomfort of being alone with your own thoughts. But this fear of silence is actually a fear of connection. You are afraid of what you might hear if you actually listen. The noise in your life is not accidental. It is strategic. It serves a purpose. It keeps you disconnected from the divine intelligence that lives within you. Every notification, every urgent demand for your attention, every crisis that feels like it cannot wait, pulls you further away from the still, small voice that has been trying to reach you your entire life. Think of a radio trying to receive a signal from a distant station while surrounded by electromagnetic interference. The signal is always broadcasting, but the receiver cannot distinguish the message from the noise. The problem is not that the station has stopped transmitting. The problem is that the environment has become too cluttered to allow clear reception. This is your spiritual condition. The divine signal is always present, always broadcasting wisdom, direction, and love directly to your spirit. But you have surrounded yourself with so much interference that you cannot distinguish the sacred from the secular, the eternal from the urgent, the voice of God from the voice of the crowd. I once observed a successful executive who complained that he never felt divine guidance in his decision-making. His days began at 5 in the morning with news podcasts and ended at midnight with business calls. Every moment between was filled with meetings, emails, and phone calls. When I asked him, when he made time for silence, he looked at me as if I had spoken a foreign language. "I don't have time for silence," he said. "I have a business to run." But here was his problem. He was trying to run a business without consulting the ultimate business advisor who lived within him. He was making decisions without accessing the infinite intelligence that was available to guide every choice. He was operating from his limited human perspective instead of his unlimited divine connection. I challenged him to spend just 10 minutes each morning in complete silence. No phone, no music, no mental planning, just silence. He resisted, claiming it was impractical. But desperation finally drove him to try. Within a week, he began hearing insights that had been trying to reach him for years. Within a month, he was making decisions with a clarity and confidence he had never experienced. The business began to flow more smoothly because the businessman had finally learned to listen. Silence is not emptiness, silence is fullness. It is not the absence of communication, but the presence of the deepest communication possible. In silence, you remember what the noise has made you forget. In silence, you hear what the chatter has made you miss. In silence, you connect with what the chaos has made you lose. But creating external silence is only the beginning. You must also learn to quiet the internal noise, the stream of worried thoughts, the replay of past conversations, the rehearsal of future scenarios. These mental habits create as much interference as any external distraction. This is why spiritual disciplines speak of fasting not just from food, but from urgency, from judgment, from consuming content that fills your mind with other people's thoughts instead of making space for divine thoughts. Every yes to noise is a no to the voice that matters most. Your energy and your time are sacred resources. They are not unlimited. Every moment you give to distraction is a moment you cannot give to divine connection. Every ounce of attention you pour into urgency is attention you cannot pour into eternity. When you protect your silence as fiercely as you protect your bank account, when you guard your quiet time as carefully as you guard your physical safety, when you treat your inner space as sacred ground that cannot be violated by every demand that comes your way, something extraordinary happens. The whisper becomes clear. The guidance becomes unmistakable. The direction becomes obvious. Not because God has finally decided to speak, but because you have finally decided to listen. Here is your assignment, and it is non-negotiable if you want to experience divine guidance in your life. Create a daily appointment with silence, not 5 minutes stolen between other activities, not quiet time with worship music playing. Complete, total, uninterrupted silence. Start with 10 minutes. Sit without agenda, without expectation, without trying to hear anything specific. Just be still and know. In that sacred space, in that holy quiet, in that divine silence, you will remember what you have forgotten. You will hear what you have been missing. You will connect with what you have been seeking. Silence is not the absence of God. Silence is the presence of God made audible to those who know how to listen. Number 5, the silent testimony of an aligned life. You have been deceived into believing that spiritual power is loud, dramatic, and obvious. You think divine presence must announce itself with miracles, signs, and supernatural manifestations. But the most profound spiritual influence is often the quietest. The deepest power flows through those who have learned to walk with such reverence and alignment that their very presence shifts the atmosphere without a single word being spoken. True spirituality does not need to prove itself. It simply is. You have watched people who claim great faith but live in chaos. You have observed those who speak eloquently about divine principles while their personal lives contradict every word they preach. You have witnessed leaders who can quote scripture but cannot control their temper, who can explain theology but cannot manage their finances, who can teach about love but cannot maintain their relationships. These individuals have confused noise with power, volume with authority, declaration with demonstration. They believe that speaking about spiritual principles loudly enough will compensate for living them inconsistently. But there is another kind of spiritual presence entirely. It belongs to those who have learned that the most powerful sermon is not preached from a pulpit but lived from a pure heart. Their influence comes not from what they say but from who they are. Their power emanates not from their words, but from their walk. Imagine a lake so still and clear that it perfectly reflects everything around it. The lake does not announce its presence. It does not demand attention. It does not argue for its worth. Yet everyone who approaches it is immediately affected by its serenity. This is the nature of an aligned life. It influences through presence, not propaganda. When you finally align your inner reality with your outer actions, when your heart and your behavior speak the same language, when your private choices reflect your public convictions, something remarkable happens. You develop a gravitational force that draws people not to your opinions, but to your essence. I once worked with a businessman who rarely spoke about his faith, but lived it so consistently that everyone who encountered him was impacted. His employees did not work for him because of his charisma, but because of his character. His competitors did not fear his strategies, but respected his integrity. His family did not obey him because of his authority, but honored him because of his authenticity. He never preached about honesty, but his word was more valuable than any contract. He never lectured about generosity, but his giving transformed communities. He never proclaimed his spirituality, but his presence carried a peace that made people want to examine their own lives. This man understood what many spiritual people miss. The goal is not to be recognized as spiritual, but to be so aligned with divine principles that your life becomes a magnet for those seeking truth. Your silence carries more weight than their sermons. Your calm presence brings more peace than their excited proclamations. Your quiet confidence inspires more faith than their loud declarations. An aligned person does not need to explain themselves constantly because their life explains itself. They do not need to defend their decisions because their decisions consistently prove themselves wise. They do not need to convince others of their connection to divine wisdom because that connection is evident in every choice they make. When you live in this kind of alignment, your words carry weight because your life gives them credibility. When you speak, people listen not because you are loud, but because you are authentic. When you give advice, people receive it not because you are eloquent, but because you are experienced in walking what you talk. This is not about perfection. This is about consistency. This is not about never making mistakes. This is about learning from every mistake and allowing each lesson to deepen your alignment. This is not about having all the answers. This is about asking the right questions and living the answers you receive. The world does not need more people who can talk about spirituality. The world needs more people who can demonstrate it. The world does not need more theories about divine power. The world needs more examples of divine power working through surrendered lives. Your mission is not to convince anyone of anything. Your mission is to live so aligned with divine principles that your life becomes an invitation for others to remember their own divine connection. Your presence should whisper to their spirit what their circumstances have made them forget. Here is what happens when you embrace this kind of silent testimony. People begin to seek you out, not for what you can give them, but for who you are. They find themselves calmer in your presence without understanding why. They make better decisions after spending time with you without realizing the connection. They remember their own divine nature simply by being around someone who has not forgotten theirs. This is the true test of spiritual maturity. Not how eloquently you can speak about divine principles, but how consistently you can live them. Not how loudly you can declare your faith, but how quietly you can demonstrate it. Stop trying to convince the world of your spiritual depth. Start living with such alignment that your depth becomes undeniable. Let your life be the sermon. Let your choices be the testimony. Let your presence be the proof. The call has already been made. The question is not whether you will respond with words, but whether you will respond with your life. Number 6, intuition as the voice of the eternal. You have been programmed to trust everything except the most reliable guidance system you possess. You consult experts, analyze data, seek opinions, and research possibilities, while completely ignoring the divine intelligence that speaks to you through your intuition. You have been taught to dismiss these inner promptings as hunches, feelings, or coincidences when they are actually the most sophisticated navigation system available to human consciousness. Intuition is not guesswork. It is God's work. It is not random impulse. It is divine intelligence flowing through your spirit, offering you information that your mind could never access through logical analysis alone. You experience this phenomenon every day, but you have been conditioned to minimize its significance. You think of someone moments before they call. You feel hesitant about a business deal that looks perfect on paper, only to discover later that your hesitation was warranted. You sense something about a person that contradicts their reputation, and time proves your instinct correct. These are not coincidences, these are conversations. Divine intelligence is constantly communicating with you through a channel that bypasses your analytical mind and speaks directly to your spirit. But you have been taught to trust only what you can prove, measure, and explain, so you dismiss the very guidance that could transform your life. Think of intuition as a direct line between your finite understanding and infinite wisdom. It is like having access to a supercomputer that can process variables, calculate probabilities, and anticipate outcomes faster than your conscious mind could ever comprehend. This system operates beyond the limitations of your knowledge, education, and experience. But here is what makes intuition particularly challenging for most people. It does not operate like your rational mind. Your mind speaks in sentences, explanations, and logical progressions. Intuition speaks in impressions, sensations, and sudden knowings that often cannot be explained but can always be trusted. I recall a woman who felt a strong impulse to take a different route home from work one evening. The impulse made no logical sense. The alternate route was longer and took her through an unfamiliar neighborhood. But the feeling was so persistent that she followed it. Later that night, she learned that her usual route had been blocked by a serious accident that occurred exactly when she would have been driving through that area. She could not explain how she knew to avoid that route. She had no logical reason for her decision, but she followed the inner prompting, and it potentially saved her life. This is how intuition operates. It provides guidance that surpasses understanding, direction that transcends logic, and protection that exceeds human wisdom. The challenge is learning to distinguish between authentic, intuitive guidance and mental noise. Fear speaks loudly and urgently, often disguising itself as intuition. Anxiety creates false alarms that can feel like divine warnings. Wishful thinking can masquerade as spiritual guidance. But true intuition has distinct characteristics. It comes with a quiet confidence rather than anxious urgency. It often suggests actions that your logical mind would not choose, but your spirit recognizes as right. It speaks once and then waits, unlike fear, which repeats itself obsessively. It brings peace even when it challenges your preferences. Most importantly, authentic intuition always aligns with divine principles. It will never guide you toward deception, selfishness, or harm to others. It will never contradict the fundamental laws of love, integrity, and wisdom. It may challenge your comfort zone, but it will never compromise your character. The reason most people struggle to hear intuitive guidance is not because it is absent, but because they have filled their lives with so much noise that they cannot distinguish the whisper from the shouting. Intuition requires inner stillness to be received clearly. It demands a quiet mind and an open heart. When you learn to honor these inner promptings, when you begin to trust the guidance that comes through your spirit rather than just your intellect, when you start following divine direction even when you cannot explain it logically, your life begins to flow with a synchronicity that amazes even you. Doors open at exactly the right time, people appear precisely when you need them, opportunities present themselves just as you become ready to receive them. This is not luck. This is life lived in partnership with divine intelligence through the channel of intuitive guidance. But developing this relationship requires practice and trust. You must start following small promptings before you can trust larger ones. You must learn to distinguish between authentic guidance and mental projection through experience. You must develop the courage to act on divine direction even when others cannot understand your choices. Here is your first step toward developing this divine connection. Pay attention to the subtle impressions you receive throughout each day. Notice when you feel drawn to call someone, take a different route, or avoid a particular situation. Instead of dismissing these feelings, follow them when they feel peaceful and wise. Start a journal where you record these impressions and their outcomes. You will begin to see patterns that prove the reliability of this guidance system. You will develop confidence in distinguishing between authentic prompting and mental noise. You will learn to trust the voice of the eternal that speaks through your intuition. Remember, you are not trying to develop psychic abilities. You are learning to hear the divine intelligence that has been speaking to you your entire life. You are not becoming more spiritual. You are becoming more aware of the spiritual guidance that has always been available. Intuition is not a gift reserved for a special few. It is the birthright of every person who learns to quiet their mind long enough to hear their spirit speak. Number 7, the role of fear in spiritual growth. You have been taught to see fear as your enemy, as evidence of weakness, as something to overcome or eliminate. But this understanding has kept you from recognizing one of the most reliable indicators of spiritual growth available to human consciousness. Fear is not your obstacle. Fear is your compass. It points consistently toward the very territories your soul needs to explore for its evolution. The presence of fear does not signal that you are moving in the wrong direction. It signals that you are moving towards something significant. Every transformational moment in human history has been preceded by fear. Every breakthrough in personal development has required someone to feel afraid and move forward anyway. Every expansion of consciousness has demanded that individuals walk through the discomfort of the unknown rather than remain in the comfort of the familiar. But you have been conditioned to interpret fear as a stop sign rather than a directional signal. You believe that feeling afraid means you should retreat, reconsider, or wait until the fear subsides. This interpretation has kept you trapped in circles of safety that become smaller and smaller until your entire life fits within the boundaries of what feels comfortable. Here is what you must understand about the relationship between fear and faith. They are not opposites, they are dance partners. Faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is the presence of movement despite fear. Courage is not feeling unafraid. Courage is feeling afraid and choosing action over paralysis. Consider the nature of every significant decision you have ever made. Starting a business, entering a relationship, having children, changing careers, moving to a new city. Each of these decisions involved stepping into unknown territory. Each required you to act without guarantees. Each demanded that you feel the fear and proceed anyway. The moments you look back on with the greatest pride are not the moments when you felt confident. They are the moments when you felt terrified but acted with conviction anyway. Your most meaningful achievements were born not from certainty, but from the willingness to embrace uncertainty with faith. I knew a man who spent years talking about writing a book. He had the knowledge, the experience, and the time, but every time he sat down to begin, fear would overwhelm him. Fear of failure, fear of criticism, fear of discovering he was not as capable as he imagined. For years, he let this fear keep him from starting. One day, he realized that his fear was not warning him away from writing. His fear was confirming that writing was exactly what his soul needed to do. The very thing that frightened him most was the thing his spirit was calling him toward. He began writing while trembling. He completed the first chapter while doubting. He finished the book while still uncertain of its value. That book went on to impact thousands of lives, but it never would have existed if he had waited for the fear to disappear. This is the secret that separates those who live extraordinary lives from those who settle for ordinary ones. Extraordinary people have learned to use fear as fuel rather than allowing it to become a barrier. They understand that the things worth doing are often the things that make them afraid. Fear serves a divine purpose in human development. It ensures that growth requires intention. It demands that expansion be conscious rather than accidental. It guarantees that every significant step forward is taken with awareness and commitment rather than casual indifference. But there is a crucial distinction between fear that protects and fear that paralyzes. Protective fear keeps you from stepping into traffic or touching hot stoves. This fear serves your physical safety and should be heeded. Paralyzing fear keeps you from stepping into your potential or touching your purpose. This fear serves only your ego's desire for comfort and should be challenged. The question is not whether you feel afraid. The question is what you do with the fear when it arises. Do you let it dictate your decisions, or do you let it inform your choices? Do you allow it to shrink your world, or do you use it to expand your faith? When you begin to see fear as a signpost pointing toward growth rather than a wall blocking your path, everything changes. You start moving toward the things that scare you instead of away from them. You begin to understand that the discomfort you feel is not punishment but promotion. You realize that every time you choose courage over comfort, you strengthen your faith muscle and expand your capacity for even greater courage. Here is the practice that will transform your relationship with fear. The next time you feel afraid of taking action towards something meaningful, pause and ask yourself this question: is this fear protecting my safety or protecting my comfort? If it is protecting your safety, listen to it. If it is protecting your comfort, challenge it. Then take one small action toward what scares you, not because you feel brave, but because you recognize that bravery is not a prerequisite for right action. Call the person you have been afraid to call. Start the project you have been afraid to begin. Have the conversation you have been afraid to initiate. Each time you move through fear rather than around it, you prove to yourself that fear is not your master. You demonstrate that courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. You discover that the thing you were most afraid of losing by taking action was never as valuable as what you gained by refusing to be paralyzed. Fear will never disappear completely from your life, but it can be transformed from a prison guard into a personal trainer, from an enemy into an ally, from a stop sign into a starting block. The very thing you are most afraid to do may be the very thing your soul is most calling you to become. Number 8, the universe responds to alignment. You have been struggling, pushing, and forcing your way through life, wondering why everything feels like such an uphill battle. You hustle harder, work longer, and try more strategies, yet the very things you desperately seek continue to elude you. But here is what you have failed to understand. The universe does not respond to effort alone. The universe responds to alignment. When you align your actions with your authentic purpose, when you harmonize your choices with your divine essence, when you synchronize your behavior with universal principles, everything changes. Not because you have worked harder, but because you have worked in harmony with forces far greater than your individual will. You have been taught that success requires relentless effort, that achievement demands sacrifice, that progress necessitates struggle. But this is only true when you are working against the natural flow of your purpose instead of with it. When you discover your divine assignment and begin operating within it, work becomes play, effort becomes effortless, and struggle transforms into flow. Think of a river trying to flow uphill versus a river following its natural course. The same water, the same energy, but completely different experiences. One is characterized by resistance, friction, and eventual exhaustion. The other is characterized by power, grace, and unstoppable momentum. This is the difference between living in alignment and living in opposition to your authentic design. When you are aligned, opportunities appear without you chasing them. The right people show up at exactly the right time. Resources become available just when you need them. Doors open that you never even knew existed. This is not magic. This is physics. This is the natural result of aligning your personal frequency with universal frequency. When you operate from your authentic purpose, you emit a vibrational signal that attracts everything necessary for the fulfillment of that purpose. I observed a man who spent 15 years struggling to build a successful consulting business. He was intelligent, hardworking, and persistent, but success remained elusive. He was constantly networking, marketing, and pursuing clients with little to show for his enormous effort. Then he discovered something that changed everything. He realized he had been trying to build a business around what he thought would be profitable, rather than what he was genuinely passionate about. He had been operating from his head instead of his heart, from market analysis instead of authentic calling. When he shifted his focus to the work that actually energized him, everything transformed. Within 6 months, clients began seeking him out instead of him chasing them. Referrals started flowing naturally because his passion was contagious. His income tripled not because he worked 3 times harder, but because he was finally working in alignment with his authentic design. The universe began collaborating with him because he was no longer fighting against his own nature. This is what happens when you stop trying to force outcomes and start focusing on alignment. When you stop asking, "What can I get?" and start asking, What am I called to give? When you stop pursuing what looks successful and start pursuing what feels authentic, alignment creates a magnetic field around your life that attracts exactly what belongs to you and repels what does not. You stop wasting energy on opportunities that are not meant for you. You stop investing time in relationships that drain your vitality. You stop pursuing goals that satisfy your ego but starve your soul. Instead, you begin to experience what can only be described as divine coordination. People connect you with exactly the resources you need. Ideas come to you at precisely the right moment. Circumstances arrange themselves in ways that support your highest good. This is not coincidence. This is coherence. But alignment is not a one-time achievement. It is a daily practice. Every morning you wake up with the choice to either move closer to or further from your authentic purpose. Every decision either strengthens or weakens your vibrational alignment. Every action either supports or sabotages your natural flow. The challenge is that alignment often requires you to release things that look like success but feel like struggle. It may demand that you walk away from opportunities that impress others but exhaust you. It might require you to disappoint people who benefit from your misalignment. But here is what you discover when you have the courage to choose alignment over approval. What you lose in external validation, you gain in internal vitality. What you sacrifice in immediate gratification, you receive in lasting fulfillment. What you give up in broad appeal, you gain in deep impact. When you are truly aligned, you do not need to convince anyone of your value because your value becomes self-evident. You do not need to market yourself aggressively because your authenticity markets itself. You do not need to manipulate circumstances because circumstances begin to support your purpose naturally. The universe is not neutral. It has preferences. It prefers truth over deception, authenticity over pretense, love over fear, purpose over profit. When you align your life with these universal preferences, you discover that the same forces that move planets and grow trees are available to support your highest expression. Here is your pathway to experiencing this divine coordination in your own life. Begin each day by asking yourself this question: what would alignment look like in this situation? Then choose the option that honors your authentic nature, even if it challenges your ego's preferences. When you face decisions, ask not, what will make me look successful, but what will make me feel aligned? When you encounter opportunities, ask not, what can I gain, but what can I give? When you interact with others, ask not, how can I impress them, but how can I serve them? This shift in orientation from getting to giving, from impressing to expressing, from achieving to aligning, creates the vibrational coherence that allows the universe to work with you instead of against you. Stop fighting the current. Start flowing with your purpose. The universe has been waiting to collaborate with you, but it can only support who you actually are, not who you pretend to be. Number 9, spiritual blockage and energy saturation. You wonder why divine guidance feels distant, why spiritual clarity seems elusive, why the voice of God appears to have gone silent in your life, but the issue is not divine absence. The issue is spiritual interference. You have surrounded yourself with so much noise, consumed so much negativity, and tolerated so much toxicity that your spiritual receiver has become clogged with static. The divine signal is always broadcasting. The problem is that you cannot distinguish the sacred from the secular when your spiritual channels are saturated with pollution. You live in an age of unprecedented information overload. Every day, you consume more data than previous generations processed in months. Your mind is bombarded with news designed to create anxiety, entertainment engineered to capture addiction, and social media structured to generate comparison and inadequacy. Then you wonder why you cannot hear the still, small voice that speaks in whispers rather than shouts. Imagine trying to have a meaningful conversation in a nightclub where music is blasting, lights are flashing, and hundreds of people are talking simultaneously. The person trying to speak to you may have the most important message you could ever receive, but the environment makes meaningful communication impossible. This is your spiritual condition when you fill your life with noise and wonder why divine communication feels unclear. Your spiritual channels operate like any other communication system. They have a limited bandwidth. When that bandwidth is consumed by fear-based thinking, toxic relationships, mindless entertainment, and emotional drama, there is no space left for divine transmission. The sacred cannot compete with the secular for your attention when you have given the secular unlimited access to your consciousness. Think of your mind as a garden. Whatever you plant will grow. Whatever you water will flourish. Whatever you allow to take root will eventually dominate the landscape. If you plant your mental garden with seeds of worry, water it with negative media consumption, and allow weeds of toxic relationships to take root, you cannot expect to harvest peace, clarity, or divine direction. I knew a woman who complained constantly about feeling spiritually dry and emotionally exhausted. She could not understand why her prayers felt empty and her meditation practice felt ineffective. But when I examined her daily habits, the problem became obvious. She began each morning by checking social media, filling her mind with the problems and opinions of hundreds of people before she had even connected with her own thoughts. She consumed news throughout the day, saturating her consciousness with stories of conflict, crisis, and catastrophe. She spent her evenings watching television shows filled with violence, dysfunction, and moral confusion. Then she wondered why she felt anxious, confused, and disconnected from divine peace. She was trying to receive spiritual guidance through channels that were completely saturated with spiritual pollution. I challenged her to conduct a 30-day experiment. For 1 month, she would fast from all social media, limit news consumption to 10 minutes per day, and eliminate entertainment that celebrated values contrary to her spiritual beliefs. Instead, she would fill that time with silence, meditation, inspirational reading, and meaningful conversation. The transformation was dramatic. Within 2 weeks, her anxiety began to decrease. Within a month, she was experiencing spiritual clarity she had not felt in years. The divine voice had not returned. It had always been present, but she had finally created the inner environment necessary to receive its transmission clearly. This is the truth that every spiritually conscious person must understand. Clarity comes not from divine addition, but from environmental subtraction. Peace emerges not when you add more spiritual practices, but when you remove more spiritual pollutants. Divine direction becomes obvious, not when God starts speaking louder, but when you start listening in a quieter space. Your spiritual sensitivity is directly related to your spiritual selectivity. What you allow into your consciousness determines what you can receive from consciousness. What you feed your mind determines what your mind can digest. What you expose your spirit to determines what your spirit can access. But this is not about isolation or withdrawal from the world. This is about conscious curation of your inner environment. This is about protecting your spiritual bandwidth as carefully as you protect your financial resources. This is about recognizing that your attention is sacred and should not be given carelessly to forces that diminish your divine connection. Toxic relationships drain your spiritual energy and cloud your divine clarity. People who consistently operate from fear, negativity, and drama create interference in your spiritual reception. This does not mean you abandon everyone who struggles, but it does mean you establish boundaries with those who refuse to take responsibility for their own spiritual and emotional state. Mindless consumption of entertainment that celebrates values contrary to your highest beliefs programs your subconscious mind with messages that compete with divine truth. When you fill your imagination with images of violence, your thoughts with stories of dysfunction, and your emotions with artificial drama, you create internal static that blocks spiritual clarity. Fear-based thinking creates the most powerful interference of all. When you rehearse worst-case scenarios, replay past failures, and project future catastrophes, you generate such strong negative frequencies that they overwhelm any divine signal trying to reach you. Here is your pathway to clearing these spiritual blockages and restoring divine clarity to your life. Begin immediately by identifying the 3 most toxic influences in your daily routine. These might be news sources that consistently generate anxiety, social media accounts that promote comparison, entertainment that celebrates values you reject, or relationships that drain your energy and cloud your peace. Eliminate these influences for 30 days. Not forever, but long enough to experience what spiritual clarity feels like when it is not competing with spiritual pollution for your attention. Fill the time you would normally spend consuming these influences with practices that nourish your spirit. Meditation, prayer, inspirational reading, time in nature, meaningful conversation with people who share your values. Notice how this affects your ability to receive divine guidance, make clear decisions, and maintain emotional equilibrium. Notice how much more sensitive you become to spiritual promptings when your spiritual channels are not clogged with static. Your spiritual life is not separate from your daily habits. Every choice you make either supports or sabotages your divine connection. Every input you allow either clarifies or clouds your spiritual reception. Every influence you tolerate either strengthens or weakens your capacity for divine communion. Stop wondering why God seems distant while you fill your life with everything that creates distance from God. Start creating the inner environment that allows divine presence to be recognized, divine guidance to be received, and divine peace to be experienced. The signal has never stopped broadcasting. Clear the static and you will hear it perfectly. Number 10, the call to embody purpose. The call has already been made. It echoed through your spirit the moment you drew your first breath. It has been whispering your name through every season of your life, through every triumph and every failure, through every moment of clarity and every period of confusion. The call is not coming. The call has come. The only question that remains is whether you will finally answer. You have spent years waiting for a more convenient time, a clearer sign, a stronger feeling of readiness. But the divine does not operate on your timeline of comfort. The world does not wait for your personal preparation schedule. Humanity does not pause its suffering while you decide whether you feel adequate for your assignment. The call to embody your purpose is urgent, not because time is running out, but because time is running through. Every moment you postpone your response is a moment that someone who needs what you carry continues to wait. Every day you delay your obedience is a day that your corner of creation remains incomplete. You were not designed to be a passive observer of life, but an active participant in its transformation. You were not created to consume purpose, but to embody it. You were not born to admire the courage of others, but to demonstrate your own. The world has enough spectators. What it desperately lacks is performers willing to step onto the stage of their authentic calling. But you have been seduced by the illusion that your purpose must be grandiose to matter, that your calling must be famous to be significant, that your contribution must be recognized to be valuable. This is the lie that has kept countless souls hiding in the shadows of their own potential, believing that if they cannot change the world in dramatic fashion, they might as well change nothing at all. Yet purpose is not about the size of your platform, but the sincerity of your presence. It is not about the scope of your influence, but the depth of your authenticity. It is not about how many people know your name, but how many lives are touched by your genuine expression of divine love in whatever form that takes. Consider the teacher who transforms one classroom at a time, the parent who raises children with consciousness and intention, the business owner who operates with integrity and serves with excellence, the friend who listens with presence and speaks with wisdom. These individuals may never appear on magazine covers or receive public recognition, yet they are fulfilling their divine assignments with as much significance as any celebrated leader. Your purpose is not a job title, a career path, or a public role. Your purpose is a way of being that expresses divine love through your unique combination of gifts, experiences, and perspectives. It is the intersection of what brings you alive and what the world needs. It is where your deepest joy meets the world's deepest need. I have witnessed too many people waste precious years seeking a purpose they already possess, waiting for a calling they have already received, preparing for an assignment they are already qualified to begin. They attend conferences about purpose while avoiding the purpose that calls them daily. They read books about calling while ignoring the call that rings constantly in their spirit. They seek mentors who will tell them what they already know but lack the courage to acknowledge. The tragedy is not that these individuals are purposeless. The tragedy is that they are purposeful but response empty. They carry within them everything necessary to make their unique contribution to creation, but they remain paralyzed by the gap between their imagination of purpose and the reality of purpose. Your purpose does not require you to quit your job, move to another country, or dramatically restructure your entire life. Your purpose requires you to bring consciousness, excellence, and love to whatever you are already doing while remaining open to wherever that consciousness might lead you. The call to embody purpose is a call to stop hiding behind the excuse of inadequacy and start revealing the divine light that lives within you. It is a call to stop waiting for permission and start taking responsibility. It is a call to stop preparing for life and start living with purpose. This does not mean you act recklessly or without wisdom. This means you act faithfully with whatever understanding you currently possess, trusting that additional clarity will come through movement rather than meditation alone. This means you stop using the lack of complete knowledge as an excuse for complete inaction. When you finally answer the call to embody your purpose, several things happen that transform not only your experience, but the experience of everyone around you. First, you discover energy you never knew you possessed because you are finally operating within your divine design. Second, you attract people and opportunities that support your authentic expression because authenticity is magnetic. Third, you begin to impact lives in ways you never imagined because purpose always serves something larger than the self. But perhaps most importantly, you inspire others to remember their own calling. Your courage to live authentically gives others permission to do the same. Your willingness to be imperfect but obedient encourages others to start where they are with what they have. Your example becomes an invitation for others to stop hiding and start shining. The world does not need another person with opinions about what should be done. The world needs another person willing to embody the change they want to see. The world does not need more theories about divine love. The world needs more demonstrations of divine love lived through surrendered lives. Your assignment is not to change everyone. Your assignment is to change someone, even if that someone is only yourself lived so authentically that others cannot help but be affected by your presence. Your calling is not to solve every problem. Your calling is to be part of the solution in whatever way your unique gifts allow. The call has been made. It was made before you were born, and it will continue to echo until you answer it. But the window of opportunity to respond is the present moment. Not someday, not when you feel ready, not when the conditions are perfect. Today, now, with what you have, where you are, as you are. Stop waiting for permission to become who you were always meant to be. Answer the call, embody the purpose. Transform the world through the simple act of becoming authentically, courageously, unapologetically yourself. The universe has been waiting. Humanity has been hoping. Your purpose has been calling. It is time to answer. And this is what begins to happen when you finally understand what has always been true. The moment you stop seeking permission from a world that never had the authority to grant it, something ancient awakens within you. Something that has been waiting patiently through every doubt, every delay, every moment of hesitation. You begin to walk differently. Not because your circumstances have changed, but because you have remembered who walks within your skin. Your voice carries new authority because it no longer seeks validation from voices that have forgotten their own power. Your decisions flow from a well of wisdom that exists beyond the reach of fear and opinion, but you are no longer concerned with their approval or their resistance. You have discovered the secret that changes everything. The divine presence you have been seeking in temples and teachers, in books and seminars, in the validation of others and the accumulation of achievements, has been residing in the very center of your being since your first breath. This is not the end of seeking. This is the beginning of finding. This is not the completion of your journey. This is the moment you realize the journey and the destination have always been the same place. You are like a river breaking through to the surface, revealing what was always flowing beneath. If this truth resonates in the depths of your spirit, if these words have stirred something that was sleeping, then stay connected to this understanding. Subscribe to continue this exploration of what it means to live as the divine being you have always been, walking in a world that has forgotten its own sacred nature. Because what begins to happen when one person remembers is that everyone around them begins to remember too.